Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. It is going to be fairly unsettled in places, especially further westwards, but we're not looking like it's going to be absolute washout conditions at all. It's looking fairly showery and actually fairly cold as well, as we are going to see colder Arctic and European air masses coming in from the north and the east. As we head towards that sort of 4 or 5 day range, though, the UKV is going a little bit off the rails today, producing potentially another named storm with some very strong gusty winds on the southern edge of another area of low pressure. Again, we're not seeing it from all runs, but UKV really picked up on it, so we're going to have to look at that in detail as that moves in potentially next Tuesday or Wednesday. And then we'll have a look at the longer range, look at the GFS, GEM, ESIM, WF, and the ensembles, as it is looking pretty variable as we head through November. We are still, though, seeing some runs trying to change the pattern up. GFS today, for example, goes actually really quite cold with repeated bouts of northerly or northeasterly winds with lots of cold Arctic air masses moving in. Likely would give quite a few areas a widespread frost for a number of nights, and could even give some snow showers even to low-lying areas at times as well. But that is one run. The majority, I'd say, at this stage are more around the average, maybe even trending slightly above average. But we'll look at that in detail in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you have a look at the live radar at the moment, you can see there are plenty of showers around at the moment. Quite persistent and even large shower areas further westwards. Now, they have been progressing eastwards throughout the day, but as they progress eastwards through much of the Midlands into East England and Southern England, they have disintegrated away as they get further and further away from moisture source and further away from the centre of the low pressure system. So those showers have been pretty bulky in the west, but as they progress eastwards, disintegrate away quite substantially. They're focused across northwest England, up towards North Wales, South Wales, into southwest England and parts of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland at the moment. Now, as I'm recording this in the evening, temperatures are actually cooling down quite significantly. To the northern edge of this low pressure system, we are seeing some quite cold air filter in. And look, most of Scotland is actually seeing a touch of frost this evening, with temperatures down towards the freezing mark. These lighter blues taking over. Again, it is pretty typical. It is November now, but just signs that winter is descending, and it is looking likely this weekend we actually do see frosts even further southwards as well for a time. Now, if you have a look at the latest UKV, we'll be able to have a look at the precipitation, the temperature, and also the risk of that storm system next working week. And you can see through the rest of this evening, those showers continue to pile in for the west, but they make very little progress further eastwards, eventually do degrade away. Still perhaps seeing persistent showers around the centre of the low, which is slowly moving in to South Wales and South West England through tomorrow morning, before eventually moving out into the Channel. Through much of tomorrow afternoon, it's actually pretty dry and fairly sunny. Some more persistent showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but most areas not too bad. Actually, a pretty decent autumnal day, but I must say, feeling fairly chilly out there with a fresh breeze. As we head through Friday into Saturday, you can see the wind is coming in from the north from the backside of this low. It is dragging quite cold air in, nothing ridiculous, but slightly below average, and that will allow those temperatures to drop quite significantly overnight Friday into Saturday. We will have a look at those temperatures in a minute, but likely to see a frost in quite a few areas once again. And as we head into Saturday afternoon, can see another pretty decent day. Cloud building in from the southwest, though, as low pressure is approaching, and this could give some heavy rain in places across the southwest of England into southern parts of the Republic of Ireland. But into the early hours of Sunday, it makes very little progress as it comes up against that cold block of air that sat over the top of us. But that colder air will give a frost again into Sunday morning, but eventually will get pushed away by this quite vigorous area of low pressure. Again, got to keep an eye on that, as that could have some really quite strong winds within it through Sunday. But eyes really on Monday into Tuesday, we see another really vigorous low moving in here. Look at the hook in those low pressure, in the centre of that low. Lots of heavy rain and really quite gusty winds there for the Republic of Ireland. 100-mile-per-hour winds in very localised areas would be seen with this sort of system, and perhaps even higher with this low pressure system moving in here as we head into Tuesday. Again, you can't quite see it here, and it doesn't look too severe, but we'll have a look at the wind gusts in a second. You'll be able to see it is really quite bad on some of these lows. I do think it is the UKV overhyping it, as we aren't seeing it all too much on other runs. But nonetheless, if the UKV is right, which there is a decent chance at this range, or at least a decent chance that these sort of vigorous lows develop, maybe not this significant. It'll be very interesting seeing these arrive, as they don't look too big in terms of their wind fields, but they look very significant when they do occur. Now, if you look into Sunday, that system that arrives, very strong gusty winds on its southern edge, a very small area of 60 to 80 or 90 mile per hour winds through southwest England and South Wales, extremely localised, but could be pretty severe. As we head into Monday, a larger area of very strong winds, looking widely at 50 to 80 miles per hour for much of coastal southwest England, Wales, Republic of Ireland into Northern Ireland, maybe even into parts of Northern England. And as it approaches for Republic of Ireland, could see 100 to 120 mile per hour gusts. And then finally, this low moving in on Tuesday with a much larger swathe of 80 to 100 mile per hour winds. Again, would likely decrease in intensity significantly as it goes over land, but nevertheless, all three of these systems posing potentially some really quite severe impacts, especially these final two. Again, perhaps it is the UKV overhyping it slightly, but nevertheless, very interesting seeing that developing today. The runs recently have shown, low pressure moving in, potentially deep areas of low pressure, heavy rain, but not been showing the intensity of wind speeds that the run today is showing. We'll have to keep a very close eye on this and see if this continues tomorrow. But regardless of the rain and the wind, it's going to be fairly cold. Tonight, temperatures dropping down below freezing for much of Scotland. Northern England may see a touch of frost as well. Through much of tomorrow, most areas are going to struggle to get above 8 or 9 degrees as cold air does prevail. And into Saturday again, could see a frost more widely across the Republic of Ireland, into Northern Ireland as we've got skies clearing there. But again, 3 to 5 degrees elsewhere. Into Saturday, again, cold day, struggling around 7 to 9 degrees. And Saturday night into Sunday, again, a frost could develop quite widely through Scotland, into Northern England, as I said, further southwards across the Midlands, or Eastern England, could see a frost as well. Again, it'll be interesting to see some stats coming out, as of course, many areas that could see a frost this weekend. It would be the first frost of the season, so it'll be interesting to see actually how low those temperatures do get this weekend. Into Sunday afternoon, again, temperatures really struggling, 6 to 9 degrees in many areas, but milder areas moving in behind that low pressure system. And by Monday, southern areas, maybe 10 to 14 degrees, still colder further northwards. And then finally into Tuesday, still cold ahead of the low, under that rain and cloud, but more towards the centre of the low, temperatures into the mid-teens. Now, if you do have a look at the longer range, as I said, the GFS today is pretty bizarre, with a very cold pattern developing in the longer term. Now, if you do run over the next few days, as we head towards that day 5 point, you can see what the UKV is picking up here on this really tightly packed area of low pressure. If we do zoom in, you can see it does develop quite significantly. And if we do have a look at the wind gusts, we would be looking at 100 to 120 kilometres per hour. And that is looking at maybe 60 or 70 miles per hour. So there is definitely scope for a strong system. I just don't know quite. It could be quite as severe as the UKV is making it out to be, with 120 mile per hour winds, which is looking at more 180, 190 kilometres per hour. But regardless, beyond that, we do see low pressure return. But look out to the Atlantic. We see some more Atlantic ridging. That will allow the winds to veer in from the north by around day 7 to day 10 and start to introduce some much colder air. And that cold air just persists as that Atlantic ridge doesn't go anywhere. And we see more reinforcements of northerly winds towards 384 hours, with actually getting really quite cold at times. If we have a look at the temperature deviation, you can see we're in the blues for about a week to 10 days consistently there. And a better way to view it is have a look at the potential equivalent temperatures. You can see repeated bursts of darker blues coming out of the Arctic, showing the cold air spreading our way. Again, wouldn't be cold enough to produce any widespread snow or anything significant, but could definitely give snowfall over hills in the north and relatively widespread frosts. Could even give widespread wintry showers. I emphasise the showers there. We're not looking at persistent snow or rain, snow or hail or sleet or grauple or whatever, but could be a mix quite widely with this sort of pattern. And it would feel very cold with that wind coming directly out of the Arctic. Would be very interesting to see that pattern come off, but I must say, as we'll see the ensembles at the end of the video, it doesn't have much support. Now, if you look at the GM, see if we see anything similar to the GFS here. Again, those low pressure systems coming in over the next few days, again, could be quite lively, but look at day 5. This is where the UKV is producing that extremely severe low pressure system. Look at the GM, it produces nothing. It's a flat westerly flow. The wind speeds, we're looking at sustained wind speeds of around 10 to 20 knots. So nothing significant really. Strong winds, but nothing crazy. Not developing that low at all. And that's why I'm keeping a bit of restraint when talking about this low pressure system. Don't want to overhype it at all, because as you can see here, the GM doesn't produce anything at all. Beyond that, as we head towards day 10, you can see the Atlantic ridging, some brief northerly flow, but it does get cut off by day 10. Still some blocking to our north, but the westerlies do win out. And yes, we could see a cold air mass for a couple of days here, around the freezing to -5 line moving in, for eventually the westerly winds return. So, could be turning slightly colder, but nowhere near as sustained as the GFS was showing. If you finish by looking at the latest ECMWF, again keeping fairly unsettled, eventually as we head towards day 5, again, we do see that low pressure developing, a little bit more delayed than the GFS was producing, but at least it is producing it. Unlike the GM, it doesn't produce it at all, but it's not really that much of a vigorous low here. Again, some stronger winds around the centre, but we're looking at 998 millibars towards the centre of this system, so really not significant at all. So UKV really going overboard with it, GFS producing a strong system, and the other two runs really not having much of it at all. Just highlighting the uncertainty at only 5 days away. Beyond that, we see the Atlantic Ridge trying to build, but it doesn't have a lot of success. And at day 10, we're kind of in between systems. Westerly winds trying to return, high pressure's trying to hold on around Iceland, but in the end, we're actually seeing a big wedge of mild Atlantic air. And after you finish by looking at the ensembles, you can see why they said there's not a lot of support for the operational run. The next week or so, fairly consistent. You can see it is going to go very unsettled early next working week, but again, uncertainty with the exact wind speeds and severity of low pressure. You can see it's longer range, some relatively average to milder runs, that's what the most are going for, but you can see there are a few colder runs, including the thicker green line here, which is the GFS operational, which is definitely looking like quite a bit of an outlier today. Precipitation is slightly down in the longer term, again indicative of potentially some higher pressure. There definitely isn't an overwhelming signal, but tentative signs perhaps. Seas temperatures look pretty poor over the next couple of days, 9 or 10 degrees for the weekend at best. Slightly milder early next week, really only in the south with the milder air moving in, 13, 14 degrees, before it does turn cooler in the longer term. You see the operational run there, only 4 or 5 degrees by the end of November, just showing you if we did see repeated northerly winds, it could turn cold very quickly. And those dew points are cold from some of the runs as well, quite a big split there. And finally, if we compare to the ECMWF, again, only goes out to sort of day 12, day 13 at this stage. We can see it's cold over the next couple of days, slightly below average, slightly above average for a couple of days, when it turns slightly stormier or more unsettled early next week, slightly colder once again, and then slightly milder beyond that. So overall, the next week or two is coming out generally towards average. Some very cold runs like the GFS showing. Most are going more for a westerly influence. And of course, some runs as early as Tuesday next week, or Monday, Tuesday next week, like the UKV and in part the GFS, producing a really quite severe system with winds around that 80 to 100 mile per hour point again. We'll have to keep a very close eye on it. It'll be very interesting to see if that's backed up tomorrow by another UKV run. If it doesn't, it'll be a very weird sort of model output and then reversal. But we will have to just keep a very close eye on it. And of course, the GFS today is highlighting the risk of cold weather if that blocking does get going. And we've been looking at that for the last few days, maybe in the last week now, of some blocking. And I did say there would be a lot of colder runs coming out, and the GFS today is just one of those. But a colder run doesn't mean cold weather. It just means that there is cold weather potential, and that is only what we're looking at this stage. No cold weather or major cold weather on the horizon, apart from tentative signs or potential as we head into November with some blocking signals, but yet to be determined exactly how it will play out. We'll have to keep a very close eye on it. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.